Canada is sanctioning Iran's so-called morality police over the death of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini. Amini died after being arrested for allegedly not wearing the hijab properly.
To the women in Iran who are protesting and to those who are supporting you, we stand with you. We join our voices, the voices of all Canadians, to the millions of people around the world demanding that the Iranian government listen to their people, end their repression of freedoms and rights, and let women and all Iranians live their lives and express themselves peacefully.
That announcement comes as protests inside Iran continue to grow for the 10th consecutive day, calling for regime change. Security forces in Iran are cracking down violently on protesters, making hundreds of arrests. At least 41 people have been killed so far, including 4 kids. The regime continues to block the internet in the country in a bid to stifle protests. Reza Pahlavi is the former crown prince and exiled eldest son of Iran's last monarch. We spoke before Canada's announcement earlier today. Hi, Mr. Pahlavi. Good to have you on our program.
Thank you for having me.
I know that you have met with European parliamentarians and you intend to meet with American officials about the ongoing protests in Iran, and I was wondering what your primary message to them is.
After 43 years, we are today witnessing Iran's next revolution, this time mainly and centrally in support of women and their rights, and of course, overall, Iranians' lack of human rights and freedom. And today, street protests are all over the place, unprecedented in all these years, and hopefully escalating to the next level, which will probably be all sorts of strikes all over the country. What's imperative, therefore, is for my fellow compatriots to know that the world is responding not only in moral support, but taking specific measures that could even put more pressure on their current oppressors, such as, for instance, imposing the Magnitsky Act and basically put more pressure on Iranian officials. And this is something that was discussed, as a matter of fact, with members of European Parliament, which I had a meeting with. And I think this ought to be the norm of behavior from now on, beyond the status quo, because Iranians want change, and it is time to address that. Because at the end of the day, everybody knows that the regime from the get-go was the reason for all sorts of trouble, not just at home, but abroad, whether it's terrorism or the nuclear threat. And its disappearance will put an end to everybody's concern, which is of mutual interest.
Okay, let me pick up there, and specifically on, for example, the imposition of sanctions through the Magnitsky Act or other means. Why do you think in this instance they would be effective? Because we have seen in the past sanctions placed on Iran for other issues, and it didn't necessarily prompt a radical change in behavior by the regime. In fact, nothing even close. So why in this instance do you think it would have an effect?
Well, not only it is an action that cripples regime's official. If Germany has recalled its ambassador, these are the kind of measures that are meaningful and in fact impactful, not just symbolic. So therefore, I think in this case, it's not just a matter of showing solidarity. It sends a stronger message that we are taking the kind of actions that shows we can no longer tolerate such kind of behavior. Perhaps next time you would not allow Iranian officials to travel and deny them their visas, or even expel families, those associated with the corrupt officials and their families. Because as you know, Canada, for instance, is one of the most, the presence of money laundering and corruption of people affiliated or associated with the ruling clerics in Iran. And that's something that Canada, for instance, can do. And that would send not only a strong message to Iranians and, of course, the Canadian-American community who are very much in demand of such actions and measures to be taken. Every country can do their part in one way or the other, but the overall impact is wind in the sails of Iranian freedom fighters, while at the same time sanctioning and punishing the regime for its behavior.
And I just want to drill down, if I could, into what you are hoping to see from Canada. And first of all, on your statement around money laundering, I think the administration here would have a different view, that they do certainly are cognizant of that and are taking that into account. But what specifically would you like to see the Canadian government do? Is it the levying of sanctions through the Magnitsky Act? Is it something more?
Well, there's many, one of which is what you just mentioned. And as I said, this issue of money laundering is something that is so obviously and has been so obvious to many all this time. And I'm sure many officials within the Canadian government are certainly aware of it, and there's sufficient data to support it. Now putting some action into it and investigate it even further, and at the end of the day take the necessary measures to show that you're not brushing it under the rug, would be a very strong signal and will be very well received by Iranians in Iran and abroad.
Do you have a sense that this time is different for the international community? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. I was listening to an interview with the National Security Advisor in the U.S., Jake Sullivan, over the weekend. And he sort of admitted that they hesitated in 2009 to speak out on protests under the Obama administration because they didn't want to, quote, undermine the protesters, but that what we learned is that you can overthink these things. And I would note that it seems like they came out much more quickly this time with statements of condemnation, and they seem to be proliferated throughout the West, including in this country. Do you have a sense that this could lead to a different reaction from the international community versus other instances in the past?
Totally, because the nature of the beast is completely different. And in fact, I think that the world has to begin thinking, and it will be irresponsible of them not to, of what will happen next once this regime goes and it's on its way to go. In other words, the alternative is in the making. And to be stuck with the status quo and not thinking beyond that will be not only irresponsible, but could have dire consequences. We invite, therefore, those of us who are daily involved in the progress of what's happening in our country, together with activists, with civil society organizers, to advocates of human rights, to those of us who are sending and transmitting these messages to the world community, to work closely with various countries' legislators or government officials to help shape the kind of foreign policy that will not only have positive ramification in the interests of we, the Iranian people, but also in their own interest. And there are many common grounds that we can achieve by having this change occur, by thinking through the process of change of regime in our country, which is inevitable. It's just a matter of time.
In just that process, though, if I could for a moment, before letting you go, Mr. Pahlavi, challenge you on that, because there is no opposition leader, there is no real viable opposition. I know you've said often that you're not running for office, but might there be some hesitancy on the part of the West in sort of condemning or whatever actions they take, just because of the lack of knowledge about what comes next, a lack of a viable alternative to the regime that exists right now?
That is a very fair statement, so long as you're willing to also search for the alternative, because many times you have the thing right in front of your face, and sometimes you may deny and not look at it as it is. In other words, it's like the elephant in the room that nobody admits seeing. In this case, it's very different. And the reason I'm saying that the galvanization of not our compatriots today, who can no longer take it, and the way this is now developing, in a way it's our Santiago moments when Gina was killed. It was, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back. The momentum now has started and is escalating. And as a result of that, you will see much more than before solidarity and cooperation between all those, including yours truly, who can have a moral impact and leadership and effect on supporting and inviting more unity, more cooperation, which is our job at this stage of the game, to facilitate its transition, maximize the chance of success, go in the direction of a controlled implosion rather than anarchy, and offer an alternative both for domestic consumptions and for the world to see. But in order for this to happen, there also needs to be constructive and constant dialogue between the representatives of my compatriots and their actions with the world community and the decision makers. We cannot communicate by telepathy. We have to sit down and talk with each other at this moment.
Mr. Pahlavi, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.